one of his notebooks, he has 4 references to Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina, Avicenna, is a Muslim philosopher, doctor, right, and theologian. So in just one of his notebooks, he references the Muslims. They learned this, and they got to this state because of the Muslim advances in anatomy, in medicine, and in art together. Now, I want to ask you about knights. Your image of knights. Who do you think knights are? And how do you think? Tell me.
They're warriors from the Europeans.
From Europeans, exactly, yes?
Crusaders.
Crusaders, exactly. Do they also, yes?
They fight at night.
They fight all. They used to fight probably all the time. Did you always see them like when I was growing up? Everybody, listen, please. Everybody, when I was growing up, they always had a cross or a Christian symbol. Do you always think of knights as being Christians?
No.
You didn't think so? What did you think they were? Did you ever think of them as Muslims?
No.
I want to see the hands. Who thought of them as always being Christian from the stories you see in America? Good, I did. Anybody else? Would anybody have thought they were Muslims? Are knights Muslims?
Some.
And how did you know?
Islamic Spain.
Very good. But Islamic Spain from what you've learned before?
A long time ago.
A long time ago? Alhamdulillah. How many people like him have learned about it before?
Yes.
Very good. Alhamdulillah. I'm so glad that this happened. Do you think most people are like y'all? Do you think most Americans, if you ask them who are knights or what are knights, they would agree? How do you think? Yes, they would think. Because see, they always make them good, right? What do you think of when somebody says knight to you? What do you think? A good person or a bad person?
Good.
Good. Okay, what else? Who do they fight?
They fight Muslims. Fight dragons.
Okay. Fight them. Yes. Okay. Anything else from the girls? Listen, so we can hear. Okay. So listen. Let's make a general. Let's summarize. Shh, everybody. Let's summarize. They're noble, they're honorable, they're generous, they help ladies, right? They help women. These are the things you think of knights, right? They must be good and they're fighting against evil. They don't. Okay, no. Listen. Okay, we're losing here. Listen so we can learn. Now, how are these images set in most people's minds? Listen. Through stories. There are stories that have been what? Handed down over and over again. Who has ever heard of the medieval times here in Dallas? You've heard? It is a place where they have knights jousting, right? And recreating things, right? Hands down, everybody? If you go there, because I took my daughter last year, they have all names like Zaragoza, Toledo, Count of Compostela, Santiago de Compostela, Manuel, Toledo. What kind of names are these? Spanish. And they are all either areas, cities, or people from Spain. Why? Because of Muslim Spain. Let's look. This is called chivalry. It actually comes from an Arabic word. It doesn't sound like it, but the idea came from an Arabic concept, a Muslim concept called futuwa. Okay? And it meant nobility. Now, here's what happened. This is a story that this man tells us. I'm going to ask now something that sounds totally different. Who's heard of Little House on the Prairie? Right? Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Yeah.
Does anybody know her husband's name?
No, Mr. Wilder.
Mr. Wilder, because Ingalls was her maiden name, right? Now listen. His name was Almanzo, and it's a strange name. What does it have to do with anything? It turns out that Almanzo's...
He was a Muslim.
It ends up... No, he wasn't. It ends up that his ancestor, a crusader in England, right? During the Crusades, an Englishman named Wilder, his ancestor, had gone to fight. And there is a Muslim man who saved his life. Now, he calls him here an Arab foe. What's a foe? Enemy. Would that be a foe? Somebody who saved your life?
No.
And sent you back home so that you don't get hurt? No, that wouldn't be a foe. That would be somebody who you would decree that his name would be carried down in every line of your family. So he said, every generation of my family, somebody will be named after this man who saved my life. And it was Al-Mansur. And by the time of Laura Ingalls Wilder, that became Almanzo because they couldn't pronounce it correctly. So Laura Ingalls Wilder's husband just happened to be the one from that generation picked to carry on this man's name, Al-Mansur. Now, isn't this incredible? What do you think of every American? If every European knew that story, because Laura Ingalls Wilder is a household name. Now, if it wasn't for her daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, nobody would have this series. Did you know that? She convinced her mother, write down your stories growing up. People would love it. That's Rose Wilder Lane. And because she was a writer herself, in her time in the 1900s, there weren't many women working. But she traveled the world. She went to a Muslim country twice, Albania, and she loved it. She said, this is like heaven on earth. And she knew, of course, of her father's history, right? That somebody back in his family had been saved by a Muslim. So she wrote about Islam, and again, people don't know enough about this. So she wrote a book called The Struggle Against Authority, the Freedom of Man. And she thought the Muslim civilization was incredible. Like we saw before, that is chivalry, saving someone's life, someone that might even be fighting you. Okay, is that better than tolerance? Tolerance now, they tell us, is living peacefully side by side, tolerating somebody. You know, I might not like you, but I'm tolerating you. Does that sound like a good word, tolerance, to you, tolerating? Did the Muslims use tolerance, or did they use something better? Did they use that verse that we put up there? Right?
Use that verse and then put up there.
I think you're right, subhanAllah. So, what does this tell us about knights and chivalry? Who were the first people to use chivalry? Saving somebody's life. Who were the first knights? Muslims. How did everybody else learn about being kind to women, about saving your enemy's life, about being noble and honorable? From the Muslims. The rest of the world took this from our ancestors. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that something we can... Now, for the boys and girls, I want you to look at this paragraph, and I want you to see if you could live your life this way. Because it affected Rose Wilder Lane enough to write a book about it. The returning Crusaders brought back to Europe the first idea of a gentleman that Europeans had ever had. Until they invaded the Saracen. And Saracen, it's because they could never understand Muslims. Who are these people? Some of them are Arabs, some of them are Pakistani, some of them are Turkish. We don't know what they all are. We're just going to call them Syrian Saracen. They've never understood how a people could be united by faith. And they're all different colors and all different languages. And yet they learn a language that's hard for them, the Arabic of the Quran. And that unites them even more. So they call them Saracen, but we know that they meant Muslim, right? So we're just going to say Muslim. Until they invaded the Muslim civilization, they had never known that a strong man need not be brutal. The Muslims were splendid fighters when they fought, but they were not cruel. They did not torture their prisoners. They did not kill the wounded. In their own country, they did not persecute the Christians. And this is what's very funny about the Crusaders. Christians coming from other areas to attack the Muslims, because in their very own lands, Muslims were living with who? Christians, and that weren't fighting them because they knew that the Muslims were good to them. They were all living together. Jews and even people who didn't believe in God, Allah, Zoroastrians, fire worshippers, Magians, these people are even mentioned in the Quran, right? Allah guarantees their protection, safety, and says, their judgment is for me to judge, not you, right? So they did not persecute the Christians in their own lands. They were brave men, but they were gentle. They were honorable. They told the truth. They kept their word. Okay. So the next time, if a Muslim man is driving and sees a Muslim woman with her car in trouble on the side of the road, does he stop and help, or does he go on? No, that's a woman. I'm not going to help. He stops.